The United States has signed on to another questionable deal with Russia, this time exchanging hostages. But did Russia get back a valuable international smuggler and the U.S. got back a ballet dancer? Just how does the U.S. keep making such one-sided hostage deals? Plus, we're going to talk about Ukraine's $50 billion check it's ready to write to the United States for valuable military assistance. We've got all that, plus the U.S. Marine Corps finally getting on the FPV drone bandwagon. Let's talk about all of it. Okay, so this I thought was really interesting. This is the top story today is a dancer named Carolina, freed in a U.S.-Russia prisoner swap. Now, the U.S. in exchange released someone named Arthur Petrov. This is a Russian-German citizen who is facing 20 years in prison for violating export controls, according to Russian state media. Now, the deeper story here is that Ksenia Carolina is a U.S.-Russian ballet dancer. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison on treason charges, which are obviously trumped up nonsense because her crime was donating $50 to a Ukrainian humanitarian charity, which the Russian state argued was tantamount to treason, given that they say that the funds were used to purchase arms and ammunition for the Ukrainian military. Of course, her friends and the NGO itself argues that no, we're a humanitarian NGO. It is in fact illegal in the United States to raise money for direct weapon systems, but you can actually raise money. You can raise money for non-lethal military gear. But what's more significant to me is that the exchange was for someone named Arthur Petrov. Now, this individual, Petrov, was arrested in Cyprus in 2023 for allegedly exporting sensitive microelectronics. Now, I want to point out that this is a huge mismatch. The reason is because this guy Petrov, right, in 2023 in Cyprus is a classic tax haven, and it is a place with strong protections for corporations. And so the United States, or rather Russia, in an effort to circumvent the sanctions, had Petrov establish likely a network of shell companies located in Cyprus, right? Because he's a German citizen, it would look like a German citizen started a shell company in Cyprus. No red flags are going to be raised by anyone. Then he starts to import electronics, and likely this is seen as either electronics being purchased for Cyprus itself, but at some point you go, okay, Cyprus has like less than 1 million people, and when you're talking about sensitive military electronics, it can be pretty obvious pretty quickly when imports are meant for resale. Again, how many, let's say high level, let's say they were radar chips. I don't know, right? How many advanced radar chips do you really think Cypriots need? If he's ordering numbers in the hundreds, it's probably a sign that it's meant for resale. But that doesn't itself prove nefarious activity, right? You order sensitive electronics, but let's say he's doing it just to get around import duties in Germany. That would be something very sensible. So he orders them, he resells them to Germany. That itself, again, you see how quickly it can become. It's hard to prove that this is a sanctions violation. It wasn't until the electronics started showing up in Russian weapon systems that the U.S. likely said definitively, yes, these electronics going to this place are being resold to Russia. And once that happens, of course, they found the head of the shell company, Peskov, and had him arrested for sanctions violations. All of this, guys. This is the sign that this guy is not just a sophisticated actor, but he is capable of executing and is trusted by the Russian state. Because remember, there is the problem with people like Peskov is that they likely officially have no connection to the Russian state. So he could have imported all those microelectronics. He could have switched them out for fraudulent nonsense. He could have resold them. He could have gone to the United States and said, hey, if you give me $2 or $3 million in cash and a new identity in the United States, I'll expose this smuggling network. He could have done all of those things because he has no official affiliation with the Russian government. There isn't really much Russia could do about it. And so the fact that Russia trusted him to do this operation is a sign that he was deeply trusted by the Russians. And that this was someone who was well connected in kind of the Russian sphere. All of that, right, is someone who we were willing to return. And one of the arguments, you might remember this, sort of has echoes of WNBA player Brittany Grenier being exchanged for notorious arms smuggler Victor Bout. And one of the arguments that the Biden administration made when they gave up Bout was they said, well, Victor Bout has been in jail for 20 years. His network, the people he's friends with, even some of the countries he smuggled to no longer exist. Literally, there was the Liberian Civil War is over, and of course the Taliban at the time were out of power in Afghanistan. They said, listen, there's nothing left for Victor Bout to do. And so we said it's fine that we release him and get back our WNBA player. Right? Victor Bout's weapons likely killed more people than have ever attended a WNBA game. But this feels like an even more extreme version of that, because we're releasing a ballerina who's a dual citizen who, again, went to Russia in exchange for not someone who did arms smuggling 20 years ago, but someone who violated sanctions, U.S. sanction policy, literally 24 months ago. This is someone who is, he will likely, Peskov will likely be flagged for any kind of future business he tries to transact in. But the problem is he's got the knowledge. And if he can find another Russian-German citizen, something that is probably extremely easy to find, he can walk them through the process, literally step by step them through how to create a shell company and how to begin this electronics export business. In fact, it's probably likely that whoever was selling him the electronics may actually be open to continuing that relationship once they realize that someone they trust like Peskov is actually on the other end, even if the name on all the paperwork is someone else. And so, the question really is why? Why does Russia keep doing this? And the answer is, well, it keeps working. Russia arresting U.S. citizens on completely preposterous charges, and then negotiating to get back their trusted actors is, well, frankly, working great. I can't argue with it. The FSB seems to be able to, again, detain these individuals, happily get them arrested, and then simply demand that Russian intelligence assets are returned to Russia. Usually, this is done while Russia touts it as a propaganda victory, a return of their valiant warriors who were detained by the Americans for the mere crime of circumventing their meanie sanctions. How dare they? And, the fact is that the White House keeps playing into these narratives, and it's pretty frustrating, right? It's pretty aggravating. What really should happen is no one should be traveling from the U.S. to Russia. It should simply be treated as a hostile nation, right? Just like if someone goes to Afghanistan, a country dominated by a hostile power, the U.S. says, listen, we're not going to bail you out. We're not going to negotiate for your release because, frankly, you deserve whatever happens to you if you go there, right? Just like me, if I was to go to Russia or a Russian-friendly country, it would not be a surprise if I were detained on nonsense charges. Russia would happily use me as a bargaining chip or simply have me exterminated, right? And so this sort of MO, it becomes, the more it happens, and the more the U.S. pays in terms of its exchanges, the more it falls on those individuals who really should know better than to go to Russia for any reason, right? Now, the other story I thought was really interesting was that Ukraine is offering to buy a huge number of U.S. weapons, what it calls as a security guarantee. This is one of those things that I'm surprised we're even seeing this word, right? President Zelensky said that Ukraine is ready to buy $30 to $50 billion worth of air defense systems and weapons from the United States as a form of security guarantees, not as free aid. Now, one of the things that's interesting about air defense systems is that they are defensive systems, right? It's the equivalent of buying a shield in the sky, right? If someone shows up to your house carrying a shield, that's not actually a threat to you, right? Because Well, it's a shield. It's not an offensive weapon. And if there are no Russian Shaheds or Russian aircraft in Ukraine's skies, then the air defenses simply sit around and do nothing. They pose no threat to Russia. You could have 1 million Patriot missile batteries sitting in places like Poland and even Ukraine. You could set them on the Russian border, and they would confer virtually no offensive threat, because again, they only work if Russian aircraft are in the skies. And so the Ukrainians are like, listen, we'd happily buy some, but what's interesting is they're saying this is a form of security guarantee, which it is not. I don't know how else to tell you this. I guess it is literally guaranteeing security of Ukrainian skies, but purchasing a weapon system is not the same thing as the security guarantee as we have talked about it, right? And what makes a security guarantee is another state actually backing Ukraine's sovereignty. You might feel like, wow, that's exactly what the Budapest Memorandum was supposed to do. And Ukraine's like, yeah, technically Russia is in violation because they violated our sovereignty, but the U.S. actually has a responsibility to ensure Ukraine is able to maintain its sovereignty. And that, that is not a Trump problem. Okay, that is something that actually Obama allowed to happen in 2014. And then, of course, Trump and Biden, to some extent, continue to allow that to happen in various levels, right? But I think the thing to take away from this is that this is not a security guarantee in the sense that it is conventionally understood, right? A security guarantee is what, for example, NATO provides to Ukraine or to their partners. They say, listen, if Poland is invaded, right? If the Russians march through Krakow, it's going to be treated by the United States as though the Russians are marching through New York, right? The U.S. will pull out all the stops to defend their territory. And that is a security guarantee, a pledge from a larger, more powerful state, or it doesn't have to be a larger and more powerful state, but a pledge from another state to defend your territory, right? Again, I point this out because the U.S. is kind of the security guarantor of NATO, but like technically, Russian troops rolling through Warsaw should be treated by the Estonians as, Russian troops rolling through, I can't even name a city in Estonia. Estonia, it's a country the size of a city anyway. Right. So these are the security guarantees that Ukraine actually needs, right? Patriot missile batteries, not a guarantee, just an insurance policy, right? Now, of course, Zelensky said, listen, we're happy to pay. We are happy to pay. They are trying to negotiate with Trump because they understand that Trump and this administration is much more transactional than the Biden administration has been. And there is an argument to be made that when someone owes you money, particularly like another business, when another business owes you money, it is very hard to see them go bankrupt because then you definitely are not getting your money. But if you can prevent them from going into bankruptcy by, for example, giving them a small line of credit or placing a small additional order or something, sometimes you go, well, we have an incentive for this business to stay alive so that we can get paid on the other end. And the catch is you have to believe that a relatively small investment will be worth it to ensure you are eventually paid. And it's like the old saying, right? If you owe the bank, if you owe the bank $1 million, you have a problem. If you owe the bank $1 billion, the bank has a problem. And that's a little bit of what Ukraine might be trying to do here, is to create a situation where we say, hey, we actually want the U.S. we want to owe the U.S. so much that that they have an incentive to ensure that we maintain our freedom and sovereignty and economic prosperity. Now, before we talk about the U.S. Marine Corps' interesting policy shifts around FPV drones, I wanted to mention, of course, that it is Thursday, which means two things are dropping. First off, an additional Combat Vet News uncensored analysis video. I saw some footage from the Ukrainian Special Forces clearing Kotlina. I really want to take a look at this because I think it's going to be a very interesting look at sort of the fighting on the edge of Pokrovsk. And we just made yesterday's video covering the Battle of Kotlin in kind of a meta sense. So if you want access to that on the ground GoPro footage of that same fight, you want to become a member of Combat Vet News. And this is, again, the way to support me, the way to keep us in business, able to do this every single day. And it's also Q&A. So if you guys have submitted questions, we're going to answer more of your questions in another video. That's just for the lieutenant tier and above. So become a member. The link is in the description. Sign up today. Okay. So this is what I think is really interesting. This is a story that the Marine Corps is actually launching a drone attack team, right? And this is from the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. And the Marines are saying, listen, we've looked at the battlefield in Ukraine. We realize that attack drones are tremendously powerful. And the Marine Corps, to its credit, right? One of the things that makes the Marine Corps terrible is that it is a small kind of niche organization underneath the U.S. Navy. But what makes the Marine Corps great is that it is a small niche organization situated under the U.S. Navy, and it allows them to make significant policy and acquisition changes that would take a larger organization like the U.S. Army much, much longer, right? They're much more flexible and agile in terms of their ability to adapt, right? And so the Marine Corps is establishing what they call an attack drone team. These guys are really, their goal is to figure out, what do we do? How do we take Marine Corps doctrine and integrate these FPV drones into the fight, right? And then what would happen if we found ourselves needing to spread these tactics and capabilities across the force, right? The fear that the Marine Corps has is that, let's say China invades Taiwan, the Marine Corps is deployed, or a massive, an MEU is deployed. And they find that they look around, they say, wow, our Marine formations don't have sufficient electronic jammers, and we have no ability to counter a large massed drone swarm from the Chinese, right? And they say, man, if we had it, we could push back. We right now, we're just purely victims of drones, right? And again, if the Chinese were to conduct that invasion, it would almost certainly be done with the knowledge and integration of attack drones from the Russo-Ukrainian war, right? In fact, it seems likely that there might even be North Koreans who literally are trained up on modern FPV attack drone tactics that would be integrated into Chinese formations. They'd be crazy not to take advantage of that. And so the Marine Corps is like, listen, we have to have at least a corner of the military that is comparably proficient, right? Now, every press release sounds good, but the actual attack drone team is actually going to be integrated with the Marine Corps shooting team, right? This is interesting because, again, there is a sense that being a skilled FPV operator is similar to being a skilled shooter, right? It requires a lot of practice. It requires specialty gear. It requires a sense of not just of the technicals of being a good pilot, but also the tactics, the tactical situation, the tactics that your infantry are using, right? So it requires both technical and tactical proficiency. And so I think they also are just like, listen, we have to find a place where we can let these guys do this stuff, right? Because one of the things the Marine Corps shooting team is always going to do is their goal is to be really proficient shooters. And that means doing things, right, the most modern way, right? Have you seen the Olympic shooters? Right? They have crazy glasses. They have crazy stances. They do all these things different than what the standard Marine Corps way of shooting is. And it's because they need to shoot at the top level. And so the Marine Corps says, listen, we're going to we carve out this little niche where we say, listen, the Marine Corps shooting team, they can basically do whatever they want because they have to be the best in the world. And then we can, once they become elite level, then they can spread this culture of marksmanship, of the modern look of marksmanship across the rest of the force if necessary. And so they say, listen, let's take the Marine Corps FPV team and drop them in here too. And we're just going to see if they can get the play by these same set of rules that say, listen, you don't have to do things the Marine Corps way. You do things your way, the best way, the consensus best way, and then learn and expand from there, right? So their goal is to develop and refine an armed FPV drone training program for Marines across the force, inform service level requirements, right? So what does the Marine Corps need to do to field cutting edge FPV tech, right? How does the Marine Corps field it? What do they need to acquire? How many FPV pilots do they need? And enhance individual and unit lethality through hands-on instruction during competitive training events, i.e., come in and test each other's ability to fly these drones. So this is really, I think, really going to potentially be very interesting. Again, it's hard to say. The thing that's hard is that, 24 months ago in the war, FPV drones were still like kind of a niche thing, right? And only in the last year have we seen this rapid evolution where we've gone from FPV drones to FPV drones with frequency hoppers to fiber optic drones. And so the problem is the Marine Corps has to field the next iteration. And so they have to already be looking and saying, what is the future of these attack drones, right? Is it even having pilots, or is it something that is automated? Is it something that is integrated, right? What does that look like? What is it an attack drone that talks to a mothership? Is it a fiber optic drone? Right? Is it still one pilot, one drone? Is it multiple pilots sort of collaborating, coordinating drones? No one really knows. But I think the Marine Corps is correct in saying, listen, we have to master today's FPV technology, right? We have to have a fight today mentality. And then, or they call them attack drones, right? They don't say they have to be FPV. But they say, listen, we got to have at least some experience in the current warfighting arena. And then we'll figure out how to fight and win the next war, which is a good call. Now, there is one other story that I think is appropriate to cover, and this is actually a White House action taken over an op-ed by a previous administrator, right? This is a Homeland Security official named Miles Taylor, who wrote an anonymous opinion piece saying that he described himself as part of the conservative resistance to the first Trump administration, right? And he was very critical of the administration, right, in his opinion piece. But critically, in the United States, we have freedom of speech. And so, however, because he said, listen, I am part of what we now know is a very large contingent of the administration who attempted to take the president's policy decisions and turn them into not crazy and not illegal policy actions. This is actually what government does. Again, regardless of what you feel about a president, they're one man, and they usually sit there and say, listen, I want to build more housing. Well, okay, you could build more housing by having the military, seize land and then just having them put up tents on it. But that's super illegal and kind of dumb. And so it's the job of staffers to figure out how that's going to happen. So saying that, oh, I'm part of the resistance, I find this administration crazy, and I often find myself resisting what it does. The administration says, yeah, that op-ed was treason and violated the Espionage Act. And so he appears to have had his security clearance stripped, which is fine. That's something the president has the right to strip security clearances from anybody. And if you don't work in the federal government, it's probably okay to have a security clearance. But Taylor himself said it is not unlawful to dissent from the president, from any politician. Dissent isn't unlawful, and it definitely isn't treason in the United States, right? If you go to Russia and say, I don't support the government's war in Ukraine, you are committing treason, right? You will be charged because Russia doesn't have free speech. They don't have freedom of the press. They don't have any of those protections, right? You either support Vladimir Putin or you end up pushed out a window. The U.S. isn't like that. You can dissent. And the fact that the administration is not just pulling a security clearance, which is fine, but they are ordering the Department of Justice to investigate him is a troubling turn, right? It will investigate his activities. And the problem with an investigation is that this is being used as clearly a threat. They literally said, you posted an op-ed we didn't like. Now we're going to investigate you. Even if we don't find anything, you're going to have to hire a lawyer. It's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. The Department of Justice will spend years doing this. You will fight them in court for years. It will cost you basically your life savings. And it's meant to send a message, right? You notice that the Trump administration also has done the same action to someone named Chris Krebs. This was the cybersecurity head, actually a Trump appointee, who in 2020 said this was the most secure election in history. The 2020 election, right, was one that Joe Biden won. The president maintains that there was large-scale fraud. He's never been able to provide any evidence for that in court. He has never unveiled anything, any meaningful evidence in any way to support that conclusion. And so Krebs, of course, also having his security clearance revoked, and then, of course, being investigated for absolute nonsense. And then the company he works for is having all of its contracts terminated. And again, this is meant to be a message to anyone else, to say, listen, if you speak out against us, you are going to be unpersoned. We are going to investigate you. Even if we find nothing, we'll harass you and your family until you, to make an example of you. And of course, any position, any company you work for is also going to be made an example of. And if you feel like we've seen these tactics before, they are something out of Vladimir Putin's Russia. Again, so the Mr. Free Speech, Mr. Anti-Cancel Culture is out here canceling like it's going out of style. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you to Bill Collier, Robert Colburn, Gaius Martin, Gina Cresta, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Karras, L90, Petratoro, and Jalen Gao. All of our Lieutenant Tier members, I hope you guys enjoy the videos today. Enjoy the new jobs. If you haven't, please sign up. Cheers. See ya.